Thank you very much, and really appreciate everybody coming out tonight and braving the parking and the construction, the weather, and everything. You guys are awesome. Really appreciate it. So, the book I describe as an epic American comeback story that involves, it's a really good story with a lot of useful information in it. And the story um, really all took place in this area. I was born and raised, I was born in San Francisco General Hospital, started out in the same neighborhood as O.J. Simpson. He was older than I was, but went from there, moved to San Bruno, where I went through grade school and middle school and high school, and had a high school girlfriend. Her name's Jaye. She's in the back right now. Dated her from 15 to 17 until I went in the Army at age 17, and I was bad, and we lost contact for 40 years, but I'll explain more about that. What happened in the meantime is when I got out of the Army and started at about 25, I just automatically started putting on a little bit of weight every year, and there was nothing that I could seem to do that would stop it. I mean, nothing. It just seemed to automatically come on. Every year, a couple of more pounds. And suddenly, I remember around age 40, I went into Nordstrom Palo Alto, where I really was shopping. And I went in there because my pants were too tight. Every time my pants were too tight, I bought more pants. Just what I did. And I went in there, and the guy measured me. And these were extremely athletic, model-looking people that, were just really in super fit shape. And he measured my waist, and he said, "I'm sorry, sir. We stop at size 42. You're going to have to go to a big and tall store." Now, I understand that they carry larger sizes now, but back then they didn't. And that floored me. And at the time, I had done everything that I could think of doing. And really, for the next 10 years, I'd done everything that I could think of doing to lose weight. I tried every commercially marketed diet system ever advertised on TV or whatever in the United States. I mean, about 3 dozen of them. And I just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there seemed nothing I could do about it. And the problem was, I was relying upon the medical system, doctors in general, to try to find some sort of cure to alleviate this. This was my growing largeness, my obesity was a disease that I wanted cured. So I'd go back and back and back. And what happened over time is just all these years, I was seeing all these medical doctors, and I would go out and I'd have these appointments. And as I learned, the economics of the modern medical profession is that when you go to a doctor's appointment, they spend 5 to 10 minutes with you because that's what they can afford to do. Their whole practice is based upon a 5 to 10 minute meeting. And in that 5 to 10 minutes, what they're really listening for is for you to tell them your chief complaint. Of all the things that you're communicating, they're listening for what is the biggest problem that they're complaining about. And typically, they're then going to refer you for tests or, equally likely, to write you a prescription to alleviate the symptom that you're currently complaining about. So obesity travels with many symptoms, and the symptoms are high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, and many other things. So by the time that I was 51 years old, living in Mountain View, California, excuse me, I was taking 15 different medications. I was on insulin for type 2 diabetes, metformin for that also, 3 different antidepressants, weight loss medication, and high blood pressure medication, and my cholesterol was about 400, which is, how are you still alive level. So, and there didn't seem an end in sight. So bottom for me came one day when I was on a plane flight, and on that plane flight, they had to delay the flight. They couldn't take the airplane off because they ran out of seatbelt extensions. My waist was 52 inches at the time. It was 340 pounds. And just to get on the plane, the misery of travel and just movement was extraordinary. Every part of my body hurt. My legs hurt, my knees hurt, my ankles hurt. it was just no fun at all. So really, I'd stopped going outside entirely. And instead of going outside, I just got really good at figuring out ways that I could never leave my house. And the only time that I had to leave my house was on mandatory business travel. So that was one of 2 trips I had to take that year that I couldn't get out of. So I delayed the entire flight by about 45 minutes as they had to park at the gate and look for seatbelt extensions. And I just heard everybody in the entire row behind me talking about they were going to miss my flight. They were going to miss their connection because I was like this big, fat, disgusting guy that, couldn't control his habits. So that to me was a real rock bottom moment because I was a pretty proud person. I mean, I'd been in the military. I'd never been on public assistance my entire life. So to me, I was really proud about that. And suddenly I'd become a burden on other people. And a burden in a way that, I was now really affecting other people's lives. And what does this mean next? I'm going to, have to have somebody push me around because I can't walk anymore? Or where is this going to stop? Now, about 6 months before that experience, I had attended a physical, a company-mandated physical. And at that physical, my doctor just laid it out for me. He said, you got 2 choices here. And choice 1 is to get bariatric surgery, and choice 2 is to purchase a cemetery plot because you're going to need one within 5 years unless you take immediate corrective action. So I took that to heart, but the problem is with all the doctors I'd seen over the years, they all had common advice, and that common advice was, you need diet and exercise. Well, what does that mean, right? What does diet and exercise mean? I mean, I knew I needed diet and exercise. I was on some kind of diet, and I was lacking exercise, but I hated exercise. And to me, just like diet, exercise was something that I could tolerate for about a month, maybe a month and a half. So I'd go to the gym, and I'd struggle, and I'd sweat, and I just hate it. And at some point, I hated it so badly that I just couldn't do it anymore. I just gave up, and I stopped entirely. So that was it was a big merry-go-round circus of my life. So when I got home from that plane flight, I just was extremely miserable. And so the very next day, I just, I turned on the TV, and there was Wolf Blitzer talking to Bill Clinton on TV. And they were talking about a plant-based diet. Really, Bill Clinton looked better than I'd ever seen him. His face was oval instead of round. The bags under his eyes were gone. That was in late August of 2010, as I recall. And they were talking about some political thing, and Wolf eventually stopped Bill Clinton. He said, I just got to ask you, what did you do? How do you look so good? And Bill says that he was, his doctor had put him on a plant-based diet. He had this team of doctors that they were intending to reduce his weight and fix his blood pressure and reverse his heart disease and all this. And he started talking about all this evidence and all the good that it did. So I was amazed. I had never heard of a plant-based diet, ever. I mean, I'd heard of Weight Watchers and Atkins and Nutrisystem and everything else. Somebody tried to sell you stuff like potions and processes and things, but I'd never heard of a plant-based diet. So I Googled it. And again, this was in August 2010, and Google returned on the search term Clinton plant-based diet. No search results found in August 2010. Now, I did that same search last week, and I got 36 million hits. So we've made some progress. So armed with that information and the fact that I just really didn't want to have bariatric surgery, but I'd agreed with my medical doctor to get it. I was about a month away from having it. I'd qualified for it and everything. So as a last-ditch effort, because the reason I didn't want to get bariatric surgery is because I knew people that had it, and just like all the diets that I'd ever been on, it was a temporary solution, it seemed to me. They cut out, for a standard lap sleeve procedure, they cut out about 2/3 of your stomach, which removes the parts of your stomach where most of the hunger hormones come from. So you're not really hungry anymore. But what happens to the people that get that is initially they do lose a lot of weight, and they do make some pretty good progress, but eventually human nature kicks in, and you realize that you can still drink 5 or 6 milkshakes to get 3,000, 4,000 calories a day because the liquid stuff still flows right through you. So you can still have huge amounts of calories with almost no stomach. But even worse, just by forcing yourself, you can regrow your stomach to really re-expand it. And then a lot of people find themselves 5 years later in similar condition to how they were when they got the surgery. And by then it's too late to do anything, and it does have a permanent physiological effect on them. So I was determined to find a way to avoid that. And what I did instead was I did some research. I think, okay, this hasn't worked. What can work? So I found a doctor that did know what a plant-based diet was. And lo and behold, this wasn't a medical doctor. It was a licensed naturopathic doctor. And her name is Dr. Preeti, and she's in actually Cupertino, California. Really nice lady, about 4 foot 8 inch tall. Very serious. So I went to her, and the extraordinary thing about that meeting was that for the first time, she spent an hour and a half with me on her first visit. And I had never experienced anything like that before. And I've always been a guy like trying to figure out how things work, and how scams work, and how basically people get away with various things. And it just occurred to me, how could she spend an hour and a half with me? And her response was, well, in that meeting, she really was good at qualifying me and asking questions. And the type of questions she asked, she got me to admit to a lot of different things. That I'd stopped going outside entirely. I'd been reclusive for years. I hadn't been on a date in 15 years, and I just didn't have any friends anymore. I just let everybody go, and I was just kind of like sitting around waiting to die. So she got all that out of me, and then in the conversation, I said, well, what are you doing? What's all this about? And she said, well, she was there not to try to treat any of my individual symptoms, but the underlying cause of my problem. And what she determined the underlying cause of my health problems were you could describe it as all these different symptoms like high blood pressure and high cholesterol and obesity and everything. But she said the underlying cause of your problems is really lack of diet and exercise. And I go, I've heard this before. But she says, I have a solution. She said, if you do exactly what I say and stay on the program that I tell you to stay on, I think that there's a high chance, a really good chance, that within 1 year, you can be off all these medications and be at your optimal weight. And I go, no way. Now I've heard everything. Now she's going to hit me up for money or something. But she didn't. But so the extraordinary thing was at the end of that meeting, rather than prescribe additional medications, she prescribed a plant-based diet and told me to go adopt a dog from my local shelter. And so I tried to figure out, I said, the first thing I said was, well, I've never had a pet before, and does it have to be a dog? Can I get a cat instead? And she said, well, have you ever walked a cat? I said, no, but I think I've seen it done on TV. And so she just looked at me very seriously, because she's a very serious person. And with that look, I knew that I needed to go adopt a dog. And so I decided, because nothing else in my life at that point had ever worked for me before, that I was going to strictly follow her instructions. So what she told me, and this was just an extraordinary piece of knowledge for me at the time, was that all the other doctors that I'd been seeing were treating my symptoms, right? And she described what a symptom was. And that's when you turn on the faucet outside and you're flooding your porch, right? And if you get a mop, you can mop that water up until the end of time, and you're never going to mop that water up. And that's trying to treat a symptom. But if you turn off the faucet, then you've cured the underlying cause of the water. And then you can go on about your life, with that fixed. So I go, cool, this sounds like a plan. I've tried everything, so I'm going to try this now. So I went down to, I did some more research, and I found locally Humane Society Silicon Valley, and I'll read a passage from the book about that. But it was an extraordinary experience, and one that I'll read about. But just as a result of doing exactly what she said, which was learning to cook, and there's lots of interesting adventures in the book, like the fact that, I was 51 years old at the time, and I didn't know how to do anything more than boil water or make top ramen or turn on a microwave. I mean, that's bad. I know. No excuse for that, right? No. So that was my life. So she actually sent me home with a whole bunch of recipes and like very strict instructions on, you're going to look through your pantry for all these things. You're going to, remove these, and then you're going to go to the store and you're going to buy this stuff, and this is what you're going to eat from now on. And she also did something I think was very wise. She made me commit to 6 months worth of weekly visits, which wasn't really that expensive. It was a $25 insurance copay or something. And so I did, but after I put that on my credit card, to me that was a financial commitment, and that was making sure, once I committed to something financially, I was going to follow through on it, because that's just what I did. So that was a pretty wise move on her part also. But so by following her exact instructions, and by walking, after I adopted Petey and I walked him, we walked the first time about 100 yards, and progressively every day we got like a little bit further, twice a day. So within 3 months, we were up to walking almost 3 miles at a time, twice a day. And by doing that, I lost 150 pounds. Well, first, I got off all my medications in less than 6 months. So in less than 6 months, I'd reversed my type 2 diabetes, and all of my medical stats were normal. I had, so I got off all the medications, which was really a windfall blessing, because at the time, I was meeting my annual deductible for my insurance provider by about mid-February. So I was spending $1,000 a month on medications and stuff. My employer, I estimate, was spending over $50,000 a year. So just by doing this and getting off all the meds, it was an extraordinary amount of money. Now think what would happen on a national basis. We could eliminate, and the projections are eliminating up to $1 trillion a year in medical expenses. I mean, it's extraordinary what we could do as a nation if everybody did the same thing. But so at the end of 10 months, I'd lost 150 pounds. My waist went from size 52 to about 33. My weight dropped from 340 to about 185. And for the last 7 years, I've stayed at that same weight. Really not fluctuating up or down more than 2 pounds during that entire time. So after I got the weight, after I lost the weight and I was this new person, some extraordinary things started to happen to me. And number one is I started to run into people that I hadn't seen in about a year, and that people I'd known my entire life, and they didn't believe that I was the same person. I mean, and it happened for years after that too. I ran into people that had known me for 20, 30 years, and they'd finally recognize my voice, or I'd tell them a story that only I would know, and they would finally believe it was me. But it was an amazing experience. So after I lost the weight, I had so much energy. I was bouncing off the wall, and in addition to losing the weight, the more impressive thing to me was that I felt so amazing. I felt so good. All the pain was gone. Everything about my life was just amazing. It was like I was living in a Mary Poppins movie. And so I went back to Dr. Preety and I said, well, what do I do now? And she said, now is the time to find a form of lifetime exercise that you don't hate. And so I thought about that for a while. I hated going to the gym. I didn't want to do like Zumba. Just that wouldn't fit in with that. And I thought about it, and then one of my friends recommended, somebody I knew said, what you should do is you should try running, because if you try running, what's going to happen is you're going to hate it for the first couple of weeks, but then after a couple of weeks, if you force yourself to continue at it, you're going to get to this point where you're running along, it's like a light switch goes off, and then suddenly you're not going to mind it, and you're maybe even going to want to go further and do it the next day. So I tried it, and that actually happened. I was just amazed. The first time that I ran, I went to the track at San Jose State University, which was a very proud and historied track. It was the track where Olympic athletes competed on in the 60s and early 70s. And unfortunately, they ultimately decided that they wanted to have a football team, and they put all the money in the football team, and their track program collapsed and has never recovered, and the football team was never any good either. I mean, when I went there, I'm not saying anything negative about them, but when I went there were free tickets to students, and they could never fill up more than half the stadium, really, on any given time. So that was always sad to me. So then I looked further, and I joined. I looked, and I found some meetup groups that had like long distance runners. And the very first event that I went to, there was Vicky Arujo. Hi, Vicky. It was like one of my first friends. It was great. So everybody say thank you, Vicky. And so it was an extraordinary experience because they took me around, and suddenly I knew a couple of dozen or up to 100 really healthy, goal-oriented, happy people that were professional and really positive oriented and all in good moods. And basically, they all became my friends. So I had like instant friends, and we were out doing stuff. And then within a couple of months after that, I'd run a half marathon. And by the end of that summer, I'd actually run my first full marathon. And I've been running ever since. And it was like a wonderful pastime. But so they introduced me, as I said, to the glorious running trails of Northern California. And it's really important for me to say that all the weight that I lost, you don't need to do any sort of extreme exercise to do what I did. It's really about a whole food, plant-based diet and just at least walking for a half an hour twice a day. And if you do that, as I found, I felt so amazing. I thought it was like being on some sort of just wonder medication. I mean, it was like the best sort of high that I'd ever been on in my life. And I eventually realized that that's what it feels like to be normal and healthy. So that's all that you got to do. Just really eat fruits and vegetables and walk for a half an hour twice a day. That's all that your body requires to be healthy. So there were some really other interesting things that happened as a part of this entire journey. First, I started speaking to small groups, and I started doing recovery meetings and obesity meetings and like older people and shut-ins and people in hospitals and things like that. Anybody would listen to me. And normally like 2 or 3 people at a time I'd start talking to and just try to say that, you can do this. Today is the first day of the rest of your life, and it's no matter what condition you're in right now, it's never too late to become the awesome person that you've always wanted to be. It's within the grasp of everyone. And so one thing led to another, and I found myself in a situation that there's this really interesting lady that writes a blog for Humane Society Silicon Valley, and her name's Finnegan. So she wrote this blog post about this dog named Eddie the Terrible, and you can still Google it and find it. It's really interesting, totally funny if you find it. And it was about this dog that was this Chihuahua that was possessed by Satan. And this Chihuahua, all his adventures and all these like things that he did and could not be controlled and needed a special fan. Anyway, it was really funny. And so I read that, and I sent her an email with my before and after pictures with me and Petey and my story. And then suddenly after that, she got me into Oprah magazine, and then she called me and asked if I'd like to have a film made. And so they did have a film made. They sent out a film crew from Chicago, and the film crew came out. I was living in Spokane at the time. The film crew came out, and they just had all this fancy equipment, like overhead drones and just all this like contraptions and everything. It became like, me and my dog became famous in my neighborhood. Somebody started a rumor that we were astronauts. And these little kids just every time that we were walking down the street asked when we were going to the moon, and just all this really cute stuff. So that was a great experience. And then that film came out in February of 2016, and it ultimately got 100 million views. So it went real viral on the internet. And I mean, I could talk for hours what happens when your life goes viral, and because I'm a regular guy, I work for a living. This is a side gig, right? So I was getting 10,000 emails a day at one point, and Facebook messages, and I mean, it just got out of control. And soon I had a publicist and an agent, And then I got through this like over a dozen unsolicited marriage proposals. But the best part of the entire experience was my high school girlfriend, Jaye, who I hadn't seen in 40 years. We'd been looking for each other, kind of, and my wish was to see her once again in my lifetime. So she found me through the film, and she sent me a message, and I responded right away. And then suddenly we were, and this was, July 2016. So by September 2016, we decided, amazingly, we were both single. Isn't that something? So we decided to get back together. And at the time, she was 197 pounds and a size 20. And by doing the same thing that I did, exactly the same thing that I did, which is just be on a plant-based diet and walking our new dog, Jake, for a half an hour twice a day, she dropped from 197 to 115 and from a size 20 to a size 2 in less than 10 months. It was a miracle. I mean, it's just, and so this really does work for anybody, and anybody can do this. And the message here is that if you want to give it a try, you really have nothing to lose. I mean, it's not like you're thinking, well, I'm going to try this and now I got to do it forever. It's not like climbing Mount Everest. It's, let me give this a try for 3 weeks, 21 days, just to see if there's any truth to this. And you can, if you don't like it, you can always go back. But the point is this, if you give it a try, you may feel better than you've ever felt in your entire life. You may be happier than you've ever felt in your entire life. It may change your life. And if you don't give it a try, you'll never know. So that just think about, consider it. And even if you're not in a situation that you feel that you need to lose weight or that you need to correct any health problems, if you are at some point in your life, it's always something to think about and go back to. So Jay and I got married in December last year, and now we're living happily ever after. And so, yeah, so that's great. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book, if that's all right. And we'll talk about that also. So this is the first time that I went to Humane Society Silicon Valley after I'd called them on the phone and had asked about adopting a rescue dog. This is Cassandra. Is this Eric? Oh, and before I do this, when I recorded the audiobook for this, it was like one of the best times that I've ever had in my entire life. I didn't know what to do. I'd never done anything like that before. And I just go into this really impressive kind of looking studio, and there's 2 engineers and a producer and all this kind of stuff. And I go, how do I do this? And they go, it's up to you, man. Just do your thing. And so I decided to read it dramatically, and that's how I'll attempt to read this now. Anyway, so this is Cassandra. Is this Eric? It is. I hear you're looking to adopt a dog. Yes. Well, my doctor basically prescribed a dog for me and said that I should go to the shelter and adopt one. And I've never owned a dog before, so I'm looking for a dog that will be really easy to care for, friendly, gets along with everyone, isn't too big, doesn't shed, won't bark or disturb my neighbors, and won't pee or poop in my apartment ever one time in the history of the dog. I don't know what breed that would be, but I have this picture in my head, and I'm just hoping you might find a dog that fits that description. I said pretty much all in one breath. Your doctor prescribed you a dog? She did. She's a naturopathic doctor, and she believes in holistic medicine and treating the whole person. And well, she really thinks a dog will be good for me. Oh, for what reason? Everything, really. I guess I should tell you that I'm overweight, a lot overweight, but I'm trying to change that. So she's putting me on a new diet. Excuse me one second. And one of the reasons she wants me to have a dog is so I'll go outside and get some exercise by walking him twice a day. Oh, Cassandra said, well, what I'd like to do is ask you a few questions, and hopefully that will give me a better understanding of what you're looking for and what you might be able to offer one of our animals. Offer to one of our animals? Okay, sure, I said. For the next 40 minutes, Cassandra grilled me. She asked me almost as many questions about my life and background and intentions for this imaginary dog I envisioned as Dr. Preety had done, had asked me about myself that morning, from do you live alone, to have you ever owned a pet of any kind, to how much walking do you do now? Well, I haven't started yet, I admitted, but I plan to start right away. I remember thinking, wow, this is a lot of work to adopt a dog. I thought I'd just tell them what kind I want and go pick it up. Or maybe they could deliver it. She asked me whether I had friends with dogs and how I reacted to dogs at friends' houses and in public, and about what kind of job I had and how much I traveled. Throughout the phone call, she also kept circling back to this idea of being a lifetime commitment. A dog isn't a toy. You can't just do a trial run and give up. They need love and attention, and they bond with their families, you know? They want to be part of a family. Are you committed to this idea? Can you stay committed? From the tone in her voice, I could tell this was extremely important to her. It really mattered. So I thought about it for a few seconds, and my answer was clear. Yeah, I said, I'm truly going to give my all to this. It's important to me that I see this through. In a lot of ways, I think my life depends on it. But I understand why you're asking. It's a big commitment for sure. I mean, maybe I should get an older dog so the commitment isn't so long. Would that be easier? Looking back at it now, I still can't believe I asked that question. I honestly thought an older dog will only live a couple of years, which would be a shorter commitment. Would I come to regret that way of thinking? I don't know about that, Cassandra said. All I know is that I want this to work, I said. It'll be an adjustment for me, and I'm nervous about that. But everything in me is telling me to follow this doctor's advice. I went to the supermarket right after I left her office, and I bought rice and beans for dinner because I'm dead set on losing weight and getting healthy. I want to live. I want to change my life for the better. I really do, I said. And Dr. Preety really seems to think that a dog will help me. Cassandra was definitely a good listener. As a salesman, I always try to ask my customers lots of questions. I want to find out everything I can about them so I can sell them the product that best suits them. If they're happy with the sale, they'll come back to me the next time, and the next time, and recommend me to their friends. So I appreciated all the questions she asked and understood that she was invested in her job. She cared about the dogs and really seemed to care about whether or not I was making the right decision. I'd only known her over the phone for 40 minutes, but there was something about the confidence in her voice that really made me trust her. I really believed that she understood what I was saying and that she had my best interest in mind. Look, I said, maybe I should just get an overweight, middle-aged dog, so at least we'll have something in common. She chuckled at that, but it also seemed to strike a chord. You know, Cassandra said, I might have the perfect dog for you. He's in foster right now. Let me make a phone call and see how he's doing, and I'll call you back tomorrow. Okay, great, I said. All right, so after that, I'll tell you about what happened. I went back the next day, we talked some more, and so I'm sitting in there in the adoption room waiting to meet my new dog, the perfect dog for me. And in my mind is visions of like an 8-pound golden retriever. And so she walks in with this dog, and this dog was really, really fat. And he was really big. And he had skin problems, and he was missing patches of fur, and he'd seen better days. And his head was hung low, and he just walked in, looking at the ground without even looking up. And I said, where's my dog? And at that point, he looked up at me with the clearest sense of disappointment I've ever seen on any person or animal in my entire life. And so we both looked at Cassandra, and Cassandra said, look, you both have the same issues. This is a perfect match. And so I didn't want to disappoint her. So, because she tried so hard, and I could tell she was genuinely a good person. And it really meant a lot to me that she'd invested that much time into us. So I go, all right. So the biggest problem that I had with the dog at the time was that his name was Raider. Right. And because he was black and white and he was named after the Oakland Raiders. And as you know from this area, you know, if you're in the East Bay, you like the Raiders. And if you're in the West Bay, you like the 49ers, right? And so I had friends who called themselves Raider haters. And, you know, I was absolutely a 49ers fan at the time. So the first thing I decided to do was disabuse him of the name. So I thought, what could we name him? And I remember when I was growing up, my favorite show was The Little Rascals in black and white. We had a black and white TV, and I used to watch that all the time, and I thought it was so funny, and I loved that show. And there was a dog in that show named Petey, and it was an American Staffordshire Terrier, which is now known as a pit bull. And unfortunately for that dog, somebody took a Sharpie or whatever they had at the time and drew a big circle around his eye, and that was his makeup. But so I said, well, that was the only dog that I'd ever known, really, was that dog on the TV. So I named him Peety. So Peety and I went home, and we went up to my condo, and we sat there looking at each other skeptically for about 3 days from opposite sides of the room. And at the end of 3 days, he hopped up in my bed, and we slept together every night for the rest of his life after that. And we became best friends and so bonded that it was like being married to somebody for 40 years. You know, the stories that you hear, you can think what they're thinking in advance, and they're thinking about doing something. You go, no, you don't even want to try that. You know, that sort of thing. So that's how Petey and I were. It was the most extraordinary experience. As soon as we opened up towards each other, I stopped feeling sorry for myself and I started feeling sorry for him. And I really wanted to, you know, all of a sudden, you know, I really wanted to fix all his problems, and I wanted to do it for him. And he was like, to me, he loved me so much, and he treated me like the greatest person to ever walk the planet. I mean, the confidence that he had in me and the love that he had for me, it was the deepest form of unconditional love that I'd ever experienced in my entire life. And what that was to me was I was an emotionally vacant and completely empty person before he came along. And what he did was he turned on a light switch to the extent that it was like stepping out of the Matrix. And he loved me so much, and I could just tell that he thought I was truly the greatest person on the planet. And I ultimately decided, it caused me to decide to want to become the person who he thought that I was. And so I did. And every part of my life changed after that. I mean, it's like I said, I not only became healthy and I started feeling good, and, you know, I really did everything that I could every day to be a kind person towards other people and to really be less selfless, or pardon me, to be less selfish and more selfless, and to really think, like, how could I become a happier, more positive person? And the way to do that, as I found, is to attempt to do acts of kindness for other people without any expectation of reward or benefit. If you do that without getting anything in return, I believe that that's how to experience true happiness, because that's how Petey treated me, and that's what I tried to treat him in return. So, how are we doing on time? Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, it's I'm not going to spoil other parts of the book. There's a lot of very sad, emotional parts in the book, but there's extremely uplifting parts in the book that I think that everybody will love. And there's a story in here for everyone. It's, like I said, it's a story of, if you know anybody and you have any family members that are really kind of like in bad shape, you know, if you get them a copy of this book, maybe they'll get something out of it. And it would make me very happy if they did. So it's never too late to become the awesome person that you've always wanted to be and to turn your life around. And it's you know, it's a permanent thing once you learn how to do it. So we can open it up for questions if you like.
And I have a microphone, so just raise your hand if you'd
Sure.
like to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to spoil it, but so far, I haven't heard a return to him picking out that expensive toy. How did that? What did the two of you do with that?
Well, at first when I picked him up, I just bought it's kind of like when you're trying to spoil a kid. I bought like a whole basket full of stuff. So I bought like balls and pull toys and stuffed animals and all kinds of stuff. And I'd throw them at him, and he'd look like, "What are you doing?" He'd never played before. He'd been in a backyard, and he had certain characteristics about him that were like, when I came home, he'd start jumping up 6 feet in the air, just vertically. And I ultimately learned that that's because he was kept in a backyard for several years. And anytime that he saw anybody that he liked or he got excited, he jumped up and down at the fence because he couldn't get over the fence because it was too high. So that's how he expressed joy to me. But he didn't know how to play, and he didn't know what a ball was, and he didn't know what a stuffed animal was, and he didn't know what a pull toy was. I tried everything, frisbees and all that. So the only thing that he ever liked was a Kong filled with peanut butter. But he loved the peanut butter, for sure. And so he was just crazy about peanut butter. So yeah, all the toys that I bought just never were used. So just the Kong, but only if it had treats inside of it. He, instead of being focused on toys and entertainment, he was focused on really protecting people. He had the strongest protective instinct of any dog that I ever met. Like, we'd have dinner parties. Like, Vicky'd come over, we'd have a dinner party, and Petey would end up herding everybody into the corner of the room. Because what he wanted to do was he wanted to protect the entire room. So what he would do is he would always, like when I was in a room, he would sit in the archway, guarding the entrance to the cave, because that was his job. So when there was like a lot of people over, he wanted everybody that he could kind of like get them in one area so that if some bad guy came in, he could, take care of business. So that's what he did rather than play.
Remember to freeze the Kong when you put peanut butter in it.
Yeah.
Did you build that archway?
No, the archway was already in the condo. So yeah, I just painted it.
If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring you the microphone because we're recording, so we want to make sure we get the questions in. Here we go.
Yes.
What were you eating before your plant-based diet?
So I talk about that in the book also. At one point, I was, I went from eating healthy to what I guess I would call the window diet. That's where you drive up to the drive-through and they hand it to you through your car window. As modified by the door diet, and that's when they deliver to your door. So really near the end there, I describe a situation where I was so bad that I'd order 2 extra large Domino's pizzas, like meat lover specials, each about somewhere almost about 5,000 calories each, with the intention of eating one that night and saving one for the next day. So I'd just eat, and then I'd basically go into a food coma, and then I'd wake up, fitfully, but maybe 12 hours later. So I was only eating once a day because I got down to the point that I was so exhausted after I ate that I couldn't think, and I had no mental clarity, and I was just, done. So what happened was, so I'd get those 2 pizzas, and I would eat one of them, and I'd start looking at the other. And then I'd take a slice and then a second slice, and I go, well, I might as well finish it off. So I would eat up to 2 extra large pizzas in one sitting per night, up to 10,000 calories. And I just couldn't control myself. And as I ultimately learned, because as part of this process, after I became healthy, this was such a miracle to me. I mean, how could I go from spending my entire life on a quest, just a daily search, how do I get better and improve and fix this, right? And never figuring it out, and giving tens of thousands of dollars to various different systems and plans and whatever, to a simple one where I'm going to meet with somebody every week, and I'm simply going to eat fruits and vegetables, whole plants, and learn how to make delicious meals out of them. And let's talk about this for a second. Anybody can make, it doesn't take skill to make anything taste good with a cup of sugar or a stick of butter or bacon. Anybody can do that. What takes skill, culinary skill, is to know herb and spice combinations to the point that you can make vegetables palatable and taste really good and make them and turn them into foods that look like regular foods. Like, so I eat lasagnas and I eat Mexican food and I eat stir fry and all kinds of Asian dishes and Italian food and just everything. It just doesn't have meat, dairy, and cheese in it. And it took a really long time to learn how to do that. But once I learned how to do it, it was so liberating. And then I thought, why isn't every doctor on the planet shouting this from the rooftop? Why isn't everybody recommending this as a primary course of care? And so to answer that question, I enrolled in De Anza College at night school, and I took a couple of years worth of classes, really the entire prerequisite curriculum to get into medical school. And so I learned how to read food labels, and I learned how to research, do medical research and read medical journals and everything else. And I became a very educated consumer of all this. And it all became clear to me that there's a real simple system in this country in that, well, nobody's trying to kill you, but is it a coincidence that they can't make money off of healthy people and they can't make money off of dead people? All the money's in the sick people. So the entire system, everything that we're geared towards, is kind of like funneling people towards healthcare, pharmaceuticals. It's caused by big agriculture and government's funding all this with subsidies. And that's what the problem is. And the reason that nobody's pushing fruits and vegetables is because there's no lobbying group, for kale or for fruits and vegetables. And so really, if you look at it and you decide, there's nothing to be, there's no, I'm full honesty, I'm selling a book here, right? But there's no follow-up here. There's no meal plans. There's nothing to buy. There's nothing else. It's just learning how to buy fruits and vegetables and cook them. And if you do that, you can be happier and healthier than you've ever been in your entire life. Also, based upon the importance of a truly personal relationship, and my breakthrough was with an animal. So if you don't have a person in your life, consider adopting a dog, because the dog will love you and just look up to you and treat you like a better person than maybe anybody ever has before in your life. And it's that transformative of a relationship. So the combination of those things. Did that answer your question? All right.
Hey, so taking kind of a turn on that, and I was thinking about this earlier, if you could architect the healthcare system in this country, because you've paid attention to it, how would you orchestrate that?
Well, I would try to, because the thing is, I read a lot of medical journals. It's a fascinating hobby, but it's something I enjoy doing. And the deal is that less than 25% of all medical schools in the U.S. even offer one class in nutrition. So the place to go for this advice is not to medical doctors generally. The place to go to, but hold on, let me back up. There are some really good healthcare provider systems like Kaiser, who's now advocating plant-based nutrition. So there are medical doctors on board with this, and there are that are doing that. But generally, I think that it's the same thing as with smoking was. It took over 7,000 peer-reviewed studies before doctors really got on board and really quit smoking themselves and started pushing to their patients, don't smoke. Because up until that point, well, you should quit smoking. It's a side thing, like you need diet and exercise. It's nothing. Once they become invested and once they really get behind it and really are focusing on it themselves is when we'll see change. But in the meantime, a doctor, like any other person, isn't going to recommend against something that they're doing themselves. So if the doctor is, doesn't care about a plant-based diet or understand really how transformative the health benefits can be and how it can really fix like a lot of different problems, everything, then the doctor really isn't going to push that or recommend it. And then the second problem is that doctors, even though the ones that know that this is truly something that can, this is like a solution that can fix most problems. Like type 2 diabetes on a plant-based diet is near a 99% reversal rate. So it's not a mystery. It's just doctors, according to some journals that I've read, aren't pushing this or recommending it because they simply believe that their patients won't listen. So until they get behind it and pitch it the same way that I do in my life, in my primary job as a professional salesperson, right? Until they're really invested in selling this, and as long as people are going to physicians for their primary advice, and these people aren't knowledgeable and as educated as I am now about nutrition in general from a atomic, molecular, and cellular level, then if the people don't know, I mean, the one solution is for everybody to really develop an interest in this and learn about it so that you know yourself that, like, some of these food colorings are really heavy metals, and that's why they have these spectacular colors that look good in food, but you still don't want to eat it, right? So all these things, either the doctors need to push this or people need to really become like a lot more self-informed and better educated, or a combination of the two. I truly believe in my lifetime, everybody will be plant-based, because I'm 58 now. I'm planning to live to be 102. So, let's count. You heard it here first. That's, I guess, about another 44 years. Yeah, 44 years, I believe everybody will be plant-based, because in about 10 years, the way that the slope is working right now and the momentum is building, it'll be just like smoking is now. And it'll be understood and realized that, you don't want to smoke, and, the guy that hangs out in the corner smoking is kind of like almost like a social pariah. I think the same thing will ultimately happen with animal product consumption. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry. What? I would force more primary care to be in the form of nutrition counseling, and would really, really push that with all my heart, rather than trying to prescribe medications that are being pushed by pharmaceutical sales reps onto doctors for whatever trips or other benefits that they may be accruing. And rather than treating symptoms, I would look at underlying cause treatment, and I believe that that's really best done with food. There's still like a lot of really good reasons that people need medication, and I'm not saying do away with all medication. I'm just saying that, rather than put somebody in a position that they're on 15 different meds, right? I mean, can we try some food first? So that's what I would do. Hi.
Hi. What I wanted to know is, where does a microwave fit in this food preparation? Do you use a microwave?
Yeah, so I guess I'm particularly adept at answering this because I'm in the appliance industry. So microwaves were first developed. What they do is they jiggle the little molecules, the water molecules, specifically the moisture in food, and they excite those molecules, and by them vibrating back and forth, that's creating heat. So microwave is a heating source, and I have looked at extensive studies, and used reasonably, right? I don't believe that microwaves are any worse than any other form of cooking. I think that it's a completely normal and acceptable way to cook, and you're not like putting cancer in food or anything, or some of the crazy things that you read on the internet. I think that microwave use is an easy and convenient way to prepare foods. Did that answer your question? All right, awesome. Well,
So I haven't read the book yet, so this may be in the book.
oh,
but
okay.
Did you put Petey on a plant-based diet, or what happened?
I did, and it cured. Thank you for asking, because I forgot to talk about this. It completely cleared up all of his skin problems, and he had this horrendous shedding problem. I mean, he would shed to the point that he would cover the entire floor of my living room with these rolling fur balls, just like every 2 days. I'd have to do that. So I got him on a plant-based diet, and I really did a lot of research about this. And there was a lot of hostility from people when I was talking about putting my dog on a plant-based diet. How cruel, dogs only eat meat, they're carnivores. No, dogs like pigs, bears, and humans are omnivores. They can actually eat plants. When you walk your dog, sometimes, I don't know about you, but my dogs like to eat the grass. And there's something in there that they want. So dogs aren't pure carnivores, dogs are omnivores. And omnivores can exist very healthfully on a balanced plant-based diet. So here's what I'd suggest, and let me give you some advice on this. There's a website called balanceit.com where you can put in different ingredients and it'll tell you whether it's a balanced diet for your dog. Now, so I created a number of recipes for Petey that now Jake, my current dog, eats that I discussed them with my veterinarian. My veterinarian says that that's a perfectly healthy, balanced diet. So Jake is on a plant-based diet, and he has been since the day that I got him a couple of years ago from Seattle Humane. And he is 80 pounds of pure muscle. I mean, he's like, my veterinarian says that he is the healthiest dog that she has in her practice, and he can run up to full marathon distances with me now. Like serious running, like hard for a long time, and he's just the healthiest dog that I've ever met. I mean, so when somebody says that, vegetarian or vegan diets are not healthy for dogs, I say my dog's healthier than your dog, so show me. So I recently published a series of dog food recipes through PETA. So if you Google my last name and dog food recipes and then PETA, it'll come up with a whole bunch of dog food recipes that have really been, that my dogs eat and that are approved by my veterinarian and that I have a multiple year history of feeding my dogs, and they're doing really well. Thank you.
How long were you on diabetic medication before you reversed and went off medication?
5 or 6 years. Thank you.
Any other questions? Just raise your hand. We have time for one or two more.
So you can ask me anything, seriously. I mean, the most embarrassing personal information that I've ever, of anything in my life, is published in this book, really everything.
I'll double dip.
All right.
6 of your favorite spices. Just talk a little bit about using herbs and spices.
Yeah, so I would say that my favorite spices would definitely be cumin. Use it in a lot of Spanish and Mexican cooking, and it's just a really deep, earthy flavor that it just makes anything taste awesome. So one of the things that I talk about in the book is a beans and rice recipe. And if you email me at ericandpeety.com, I will send you the recipe. But it has cumin, and it's got like a number of other different spices in it. So really love oregano, and saffron is just one of my favorite things in the world. It's extremely expensive. It's like $10 a gram or something like that, because it comes off of a flower that only has 3 fronds on it, and they have to pick it off with tweezers. But so that saffron is found to be reduce depression better than many antidepressant medications. So just that for special types of cooking. Salt and pepper are basically awesome. And Jaye, what's your favorite? Yeah, so here's let me just talk about this for 1 second. So do yourself a huge favor, and rather than buy these little spice packets at the store, think about this. These little spice packets are, would you buy coffee that had been ground and sitting around for a couple of months? No, because all of the aromas and all of the flavor would have dissipated after it was ground. So if you get like a little basic spice grinder and you buy whole spices, and so you're grinding your spices like just about what you need before you do it, or you may be making like less than a month's worth at a time, you're going to get like super fragrant flavors and aromas in your cooking, like just a kaleidoscope of awesome when you cook, that you're not going to get if you buy these little ground things in these little plastic packets. So there's a lot of really good like $69 spice grinders on the market, and if you just get the whole spices and you keep them in little jars, And we got like a huge number lined up at home. I think we inventory about 30 different herbs and spices. And you grind them as you need them. It's like grinding your coffee before you drink it. It's just going to taste a lot better and be a lot more satisfying. So that's what I recommend.
We have time for one more. Yeah, here we go. I'll bring you the mic.
So, besides fruits and vegetables, what do you eat? Do you have restrictions on oil, carbs, processed food?
Thank you for asking that question, because that's a really important question I like to talk about every time. So I'm on a whole food, plant-based, no oil diet. Let's talk about this second. The whole food, the fruits and vegetables, the way that they came out of the ground or grew on a tree, right? Preparing those into foods that look like, I'm combining them into foods that look like foods that normal people eat. So plant-based means vegan. It's 100% vegan diet, no animal products of any kind. Now let's talk about the no oil part. There's tremendous debate on the internet about whether processed oil is healthy, right? Is coconut oil healthy? Is olive oil healthy? Well, you don't really need to worry about that. All you need to know is, so I'm not going to like try to answer that debate, because there's really sides on both sides saying yes, no, and there's like very credible people. So here's all you need to know. A tablespoon of any oil is 120 calories. It's 120 calories. Who uses 1 tablespoon of oil to make anything? Nobody. You're going to use about 3, and you're going to put it in the bottom of the pan. And what that oil does is it's acting as a conductor in between the heat and the food to cook the food. And the nice thing about the oil, the reason everybody uses it, is because it doesn't evaporate, but it does soak into the food. So you can usually get away with, you're going to put in some oil, you're going to heat it up, you're going to put in your food's going to cook, and you're going to eat the food. But the problem is the oil is still in the food. So you've got about 360 calories of oil in the food, which is probably at least a third to a half of all the calories in your stovetop cooking, right? And if you think about that, you split that 360 calories between 2 people, and over the course of a month, you're consuming more than 3,500 additional calories per month just from the oil. So 3,500 calories is the same as it takes to consume a pound of adipose cells, which are fat cells. So you're going to either grow or dissipate a pound of fat cells with 3,500 calories, either gained or lost. And so that's, if you do that a month, that's a pound a month that you're putting on, and over a year that's 12 pounds, and over a decade there's 120 pounds, and there you are with the problem. So sustained weight loss is an incremental thing. It's a little bit that you're doing every day. So you can either put on a little bit every day or take off a little bit every day. And by putting on a little bit, the thing is, remember how you were in high school. Most people, their happiest, best weight in their entire life was in high school. Are you the same weight now or not? Because you could be pretty easily. And by getting rid of the oil entirely, if you truly believe that olive oil is a superfood, just eat a couple of olives a day. Let the oil, there's still oil in the olive, the whole food, but you're not like removing it and then processing it and then just turning it directly into, adding fat into your body. So how do you cook without oil? It's real simple. So what we do, it's called liquid saute or steam fry. What you're going to do is all of your vegetables, you're going to save the tops and the skins and everything, right? So stop paying $5 for vegetable broth at Whole Foods, please, I beg you. And instead, just save all the tops from all of your vegetables and all of your skins and everything, and you're going to have a gallon freezer bag, and you're going to put them in there as you prepare foods. And when your gallon freezer bag is full, what you're going to do is you're going to get an 8-quart stock pot. You're going to dump all of your trimmings in there, what you would normally put in the disposer or in landfill. And you're going to add 8 cups of water and a little bit of salt for flavoring. And I also add a stick of kombu, which is seaweed, for the additional nutrients in that, like iodine and stuff, and to give it a hint of ocean flavor. And you're going to simmer that on your stovetop for about 2 hours. and then you're going to get this really dark liquid, and then you're going to strain that, and then you've got the world's best and healthiest vegetable broth. So what you're going to do with that vegetable broth is you're going to put it in little squirt bottles and put those in your freezer, and what you can't use in a week, you're going to put in the freezer, otherwise in your refrigerator. So instead of using oil to cook, you're going to take that squirt bottle and you're going to squirt a third of a cup, maybe 3 tablespoons into the bottom of the pan. You're going to wait for it to boil, and it's going to act as a superconductor exactly like the oil did. So you're going to cook your food in there, and as the vegetable broth dissipates, as it evaporates, you're simply going to squirt in more. So all you're doing is, like with oil, you just do it once, right? With vegetable broth, you're going to keep doing it. And as you do it, you're going to notice a brown film on the bottom of the pan. So you're going to have a flat wooden spoon or a flat wooden, utensil. And as you add more vegetable broth, you're going to deglaze the pan. So you're going to add additional flavor and nutrients and color to your food, and your food's going to taste better. It's going to be way healthier and probably about a third less calories than what you were eating before, and you're going to feel just as satisfied by it. So that's how I recommend cooking without oil. Everybody happy?
One last question. Did I have a hand? Okay, we'll come here.
So there's 2 camps. There's the anti-oil camp and there's the anti-sugar camp. And I'm more on the anti-oil camp, but because I don't use the sugar that I use for sweetener to make things more palatable. I'll use real maple syrup, like a dark maple syrup, because that has a huge amount of nutrients in it, or like a cactus-based one. What do we call that? Thank you so much. Or if I want to rub, I'm going to use something like a coconut sugar sort of thing. So the 2 camps, like I said, there's those who believe that sugar is poison and those who believe that oil is really bad. And I'm thinking my position is try to avoid both, right? Because if you try to avoid both, if you're using whole plants and you're only using as little sugar as possible to make whatever food you're making palatable. For example, if I wanted to make something really cool, I could take some sweet potatoes and some potatoes and put in like a little coconut milk, right? That comes from real coconuts, processed from real coconuts, and it's just coconut, it's coconut extract and water from real coconut. And then I'd put in like maybe a little cinnamon, a little bit of maple syrup, and like a couple other things, and some green beans, and it's absolutely delicious. And then maybe some tofu or whatever, but just using as little as possible for flavoring. So I'm not using like large amounts to bake or anything. So I think that a little bit of using as little as possible is okay, but you're primarily getting it from the least processed source. So like another thing that I'll use is medjool dates, which are described in the Bible as honey. It's the original honey. And so you're doing that, and it's just a fabulous sweetener. It really is. And it just really makes food palatable, and it's just really delicious. And you just got to make sure that you emulsify them, liquefy them in like a Vitamix or something, because they're pretty tough. But that's like a whole food that is a sweetener, and it has a good amount of nutrients in it. So that's what I would suggest. So I'd recommend truly no processed oil of any kind. Learn how to cook without it, learn how to live without it, and just the littlest sugar that you can possibly get away with in the form and as close to a whole food source as you can create.
Hi, we're here tonight because we thought your poster was, we enjoyed your poster and the picture of the dog, and so we're just delighted to hear about your journey with nutrition. And it's raised a few questions for me, especially hearing that you're a marathoner. How do you carb up the night before?
Well, so I don't do anything special, because as my standard whole food plant-based diet is approximately 80% carbohydrates all the time, 10% protein and 10% oil. So I don't add oil to anything, or 10% fats. All plants have protein, all plants have fats. That's how they make corn oil, right? They squeeze it out of the corn, or, So what I do is the night before a marathon, I go and have Thai food, because that's like one of my favorite things. And every Thai restaurant in the world, because the culture is Buddhist, will have tofu on the menu, and they have rice noodles. And so I eat like copious quantities of Thai food the night before a race, for sure.
And do you plan on coming out with a cookbook?
If this one sells really well, I can get another contract from my publisher. So really, feel free to buy all you want. They'll print more.
And
So
that's
I'd
about
love
all
to,
of our
yeah.
time. So a huge thank you to Eric for being here,
Thank
and he'll
you.
be signing over on the side.